Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Coach's Corner on the Bridging Impact podcast. I am your host, Coach Furtado, and every Friday I share kind of the wisdom, what I'm learning, some of the questions I'm getting asked by parents and coaches on the Bridging Impact podcast edition of Coach's Corner. Actually, it's Coach's Corner, but hey, who is really guessing? So, in today's episode, I actually had a really great conversation with a future podcast guest that really helped put into perspective something around coaching that I think will make a lot of sense for coaches and probably even parents to this day that I've kind of known, but it's nice to have something that's like verbal that affirms kind of, what you've been thinking, what you've been feeling, what you've been experiencing. And of course, we know this new generation is their number one. Different is such a lazy word, but they have been raised and conditioned into a digital world, right? And the pandemic accelerated that digital world. And so because of the acceleration of their digital communication and their loss of in-person education, in-person sports for about a year, 2 years, 2.5 years, depending on where you are located at in the US, this has had a dramatic effect on their social and emotional development, which affects how they show up in the classroom, how they show up in practice for your teams. And so, what it's really important is to recognize, number one, just recognize that the group of athletes, these group of students, are not the same group of kids that you were working with even 5 years ago. Even like think about like, so for me, my first couple of teams that I coached right before the pandemic hit, because I remember our like end of the year party was like, I don't know, should we do it? And we did it like a week before, and a couple of people had masks. We're like, what is going on? Okay, so that's a little sidebar. But those kids, 2018, 2019, yes, they were still like on their phones significantly more than maybe, I was, and definitely generations before us were. But there was still some sort of, semblance around how to connect and relate with one another when they were in practice as the season went on. Now, in this scenario, so earlier this season, and for those that know me, they know I'm a big, high five. Physical touch is a really important aspect of my leadership in terms of, making sure that people feel like they belong, they are connected. And at the beginning of the year, and honestly, this has been a fight for me the entire year, is getting my like freshman and sophomore team to just give themselves high fives. They just walk in a line, and they really didn't know how to do it. And one of the things that I was talking to Coach K, in her podcast will come out here in a couple of weeks, is she was, kind of like, well, in the past few years, they haven't been allowed to touch each other. They've had to social distance, like high fiving has been a no no. And that, like, the light bulb went off in my head, like, oh my goodness, they don't know how to act in practice settings. They don't know how, because I don't even know, like, a lot of my athletes were, they were in 8th grade. So last year, I don't even know if they had a season last year because of COVID, right? And if they did have a season, right, there was probably no high fives, right? Like, at the end, everyone's washing hands, or there's no locker room. There's a lot of different things that they weren't able to experience, and it just kind of clicked for me. And so, as coaches, what can we do about that, right? As parents, what can we do about that? I think the number one, it's really reminding them the why it's important. Like for me, like in this current situation, why is it important to high five your teammates, right? It helps you feel more connected to your teammates. And I didn't even know to tell them this at that point in time, right? This is like hindsight 2020 information, and some things that maybe I can use with my club team that I'm now coaching. So I think that, along with also just how they connect and collaborate with their teammates, has been something that has been a little bit of a challenge, of a transition. Obviously, some teammates are always going to be better teammates, or some athletes are going to be better teammates. Some teammates are just going to be a little more self-absorbed. And honestly, in general, the team that I coached this year was relatively unselfish, but their actions when it comes to people making mistakes and just like kind of connecting, and they lack some of those definite skills when it comes to handling different conflict without just like throwing a basketball at each other and getting super frustrated. Like those are really important social emotional skills that I don't think you can't learn digitally, right? You have to learn through mistakes. And so as coaches, it's so important for us to really focus on how can we develop those emotional skills of responding when they are frustrated with their teammates, when their teammates make a mistake, because their teammates are going to make mistakes. Like in a past couple episodes, I know I talked about how do we respond to mistakes, how to have a growth mindset. And while that is, I think they were exposed to, ideas around this like during the pandemic, there is something that's really important in terms of like connecting the dots, right? When you're in person and slowing things down in practice and making like little elementary teaching points that kind of, almost go back to kindergarten. That's not like necessarily like one of the big things that I'm a believer in is like you do not have to like everyone on your team to be a successful team, but you must respect everyone on your team and give everyone the respect and that they deserve to have a high functioning team. And that is a really important skill to teach, athletes who are going through that. So other things that I think that pandemic, changed for lack of a better term is just, you know, their ability to honestly, I connect, right? When I watch them finish at the end of practice, right? What is a lot of times the first thing that they do? Grab their phone. A lot of times they grab their phone and on their phone. How are they spending their time, right? I'll go like when I'm giving them high fives at the end. TikTok, right? That's one of the big ones. Obviously, they spend a lot of time on YouTube. All right. When you're on social media, what does social media condition you to do? Social media conditions you to get individual likes. Well, in a team sport like basketball, you may be a coach of another sport, or you're a parent of a kid who plays another sport. The biggest thing that I see with this generation is that they are very skilled basketball players, right? I can only talk about the sport of basketball because that's what I know. Very, very skilled basketball players. But their lack of fundamental team basketball knowledge is very, very apparent. So why is that? Well, it's, there's a lot of reasons, right? There's a lot of reasons, but I'll dive into the simple reason. The simple reason is, and I know I've talked about this before, is they want to feel like they belong in society. Well, how do they see themselves as belonging in society? They see themselves belonging in society as getting likes. Well, how do you get likes? You don't get likes for making a nice pass, playing good defense, unless it ends up in a highlight or a dunk. So this generation is always seeking out a highlight. And I'm not saying, when I was playing, of course we wanted to, have those highlights, but it wasn't at the same kind of clip or level that this generation really wants it. And their lack of understanding of what to do when they don't have a basketball, right? So for those that are listening, don't understand too much about basketball, when you have a basketball, you're able to make plays, right? And that they see online that are really cool. And then when you don't have a basketball in your hand, like they want the basketball in their hand, essentially is what they want. And so that was one of the bigger challenges to get, players to buy in, is that we are better as a collective 5-on-5 than we are as 1-on-1. And shifting away from getting them their one-on-one attention to let's 5-on-5, that's where we are at our best, right? That's where we are going to have the most fun. That's where we are going to develop. That's where you're going to connect the most with your teammates. And that connection is the piece that is going to stick with them for the longest. And I am so adamant about that. I'm so big on connection that, that's why I talked about high fives first. And now we're talking about team and collectivity, because you have to play as a team. And it's just something that I'm really passionate about teaching young athletes and young leaders and young people, because they'll end up being like myself, and maybe they'll be coaching, they'll be out in the world, and they have to be able to collaborate with other people. And it's really, really apparent who has played, sports before and who hasn't played sports once you go to college, and who does well in team and group projects. And and who does not. You have to be able to, unless you are someone that's going to sit behind the computer and just, run analytics and I don't even know that job that well, but in general, most professions, you have to be a team player. Even if you are an entrepreneur, you have to have, partnerships, you have to have clients, you have to have, a ton of different things going your way. You have to be a team player. And that is one of the biggest shifts that we need to really focus on. How you got to teach how to be a team player. And it's really, really elementary. I know it's like going back to kindergarten, but this generation has been conditioned, and it's not necessarily their fault because they were not active during the pandemic. Now, obviously even I'm addicted to social media, as I'm sure you are as well. But think about when they have a developing brain, how addicted they are to social media. So it's our responsibility as coaches to really teach those elementary, fundamental teamwork skills, and over time they're going to improve, and that connection, that's what they're going to take with them for the rest of their life. So if you got something out of this podcast, please share it with another parent, another coach, another friend. And really, I would love for you to go leave this a review on Apple Podcasts. And you can always connect with me. I love connecting with parents, coaches, and athletes to talk about the game of basketball, talk about life, leadership skills, in the whole shebang. So have a great weekend if you are watching this today. If not, have a great rest of your day, and I will be in your eyes and ears next week. Coach Furtado out.